How many games will the Los Angeles Rams win in 2024? What's going on, Rams fans and the Rams house? It's Mitch here, back with another NFL record prediction video, this time for the LA Rams. Will they improve upon the surprising result of last season? Many people thought that Stafford was finished. McVay, even as great and brilliant as he is, could not take this team to the playoffs, and they proved each and every one of us wrong. So will this year be the year that the Rams catapult into NFC contender status once again? Will they remain about the same? Because they're not going to be taking anybody by surprise, and they did lose a man named Aaron Donald. Or will they get worse, surprisingly? We'll find out in this video. Gronk spiked the like button. Don't forget to subscribe for all 32 NFL record predictions, along with coverage on all 32 NFL teams all offseason and season long. And get in the comments and let me know how many games you think LA, the Rams, will win in 2024. Let's take a look at the schedule, guys, and let's dive deep. So, the Rams begin their season with a tough game, one of the marquee matchups on their schedule and one of the best teams in their conference, the Detroit Lions. It's a revenge game for Matthew Stafford, or if you don't like the revenge game term, a homecoming for Matthew Stafford once again. It's a rematch of the wild card round, and it is definitely Ram revenge in this game because they did lose that game. I picked them in the playoffs to win that game. I was disappointed when they lost, of course, and I felt like they definitely could have won that game. They lost that game on the margins. It was extremely close, and if a couple of plays went their way, they definitely could have pulled that subtle upset off. Can they do that in this game? Honestly, I feel like LA has gotten better in certain areas, which will reflect in my record. I do feel like they've gotten better on their offensive line. I feel good about what Matthew Stafford is right now in his career. Going into last year, I was very suspect about, is he going to make it through a whole year? And last year, he actually didn't. He did miss a game or two, I believe. But I do feel more confident that he's going to be able to last a couple more years if he does so choose to do so. I also feel like I now know what Puka Nacua is. We didn't know what he was last year. Cooper Kupp still playing at a high level, and of course they found their running back to lean on and run the ball with. And then defensively, they found some young playmakers that can get after the quarterback. They definitely improved their secondary in pretty much every aspect, safety, corner. So I feel good about mostly what LA has done this offseason. The big things that will be question marks is Raheem Morris, his loss as the defensive coordinator, and Aaron Donald, his loss as a leader and a generational playmaker. So there's losses, there's pros, there's cons. And then comparing that to the Lions, I feel like the Lions have gotten better in mostly every area. I would say that the Lions have gotten better immensely on defense. I think their defensive line is stronger thanks to the additions of Marcus Davenport and, more importantly, DJ Reader. I think they've improved their secondary both through the draft with their first-round pick and Terrion Arnold, as well as some additions through free agency and trade, right? Carlton Davis being the marquee name there and others. So I think the Lions have gotten much better in the area where the Rams kind of caught them, which was in the secondary. So I think that helps them match up with Los Angeles. That being said, I still think this will be more of a high-scoring game between two brilliant offensive coordinators and offensive minds, but I have to lean towards on Sunday Night Football at home, the home team, the team that did win the game last year. I think the Rams are close in this one. I just don't think they have enough. I think the Lions are a better all-around team than the Rams. Maybe Stafford could steal this one. Wouldn't be shocked, but I think the Lions will take it. So in week number 2, I think LA will bounce back in Arizona against the Cardinals. They have typically beaten the Cardinals over the last few years. Since Sean McVay has become their coach, they have pretty much owned this matchup, which is the one matchup in the division that I would say they might sweep. That being said, I'm not sure if I'm going to go that far because I do believe the Cardinals have gotten better. I do think the Seahawks have gotten better. I do think the Niners are the Niners. The team that they really struggle with is San Francisco in their division. Obviously, because San Francisco is absolutely loaded, and they've got Sean McVay's daddy, named Kyle Shanahan, who pretty much taught, a lot of what Sean McVay knows, at least on offense. And so they're very familiar with each other. So that matchup doesn't really have the advantage in terms of McVay as an offensive-minded guy against the opposing coach or defense, because Shanahan knows McVay so well. But I also feel like because the Rams have had weaknesses at the line of scrimmage in recent years, the Niners have been able to steamroll them, especially with their defensive line being loaded against the Rams' kind of suspect offensive line, which has been the main area where the Niners have been able to dominate Los Angeles. I also think even a guy like Raheem Morris and the Rams kind of having defensive coaches that Shanahan already knows well has also kind of been a disadvantage. This might be the one game where it's actually an advantage not to have Raheem Morris anymore. But I actually think LA will beat the Niners once this year. I just feel like it's time. Like last year, I felt like they did beat them last year, but Rams fans are all over me in the comments because I've said how much the Niners have dominated the Rams, which it's absolutely true. The Rams won that huge game in the NFC Championship, obviously. And then they won last year in a meaningless game where Carson Wentz played and basically no Niners played past like the first drive. So that game didn't matter. That game, you throw it out, it doesn't matter. They played early in the year last year, and it was a good game, but the Niners ended up pulling it out. I think LA can win this one in LA this year. I just feel like the offensive line of the Rams is the best it's been in a while. I think that helps protect from the Niners. I think with a good game plan, the Rams have the drop back passer, the receivers, and I think the ability to slice up the Niners in the back end of their defense. I also feel like the Rams defense isn't great, but at home, that definitely helps. I also feel like their pass rush, they've got a few athletes that can get after it. They've definitely got some creative blitzing schemes, and their secondary is improved to the point where they can maybe get away with playing a little bit more aggressive in coverage and potentially loading the box against the run a little bit better than they have previously. So it's still going to be a very tough game and would be an upset, but I am going to take the Rams here. That being said, I'm going to take the Niners to win the second matchup on the Thursday nighter in San Francisco to get their comeuppance, so to speak. The Niners at home on a short week is an extremely difficult game to play. It's almost an automatic loss. It's like a scheduled loss, especially after the Bills game. I mean, that's really hard. So they're playing the Eagles, the Saints, the Bills, the Niners, the Jets in a row. That's really tough. We'll get to that later in the schedule. Week number 4, I think LA wins to make it 3-1. They play in Chicago. Caleb Williams, sort of, a little Caleb Williams versus LA, USC quarterback type vibe. Will be a fun atmosphere in Chicago. I could see this game being a big, hype up game for Caleb Williams and the Bears. Big team in the Rams, recent Super Bowl champ, great coach, big quarterback name in Matthew Stafford. I could see the Bears really hyping themselves up to win this game. And they do have great receivers. They do have a pretty talented offense overall. I think their offensive line's improving, the running back position. I think their offense could be a lot of fun, but I think it will also be inconsistent. I could see a team on defense like the Rams kind of giving Caleb a few issues with the creativity they bring, especially with the blitzing looks and things. I assume that they'll have a similar defense to the way they played last year with some of the, simulated pressure looks and who's dropping and who's coming. And then the rotation of the safeties has been a big deal there in LA in recent years. So I feel like that's kind of a bad recipe for a rookie quarterback. On the other side, the Bears have a very solid defense. It will not be easy to break down, but I also feel like it's fairly simplistic. And when you play a veteran quarterback and an excellent offensive coordinator, it's hard to play that style of defense unless you have absolutely phenomenal talent. And the Bears do not have a great pass rush, which is the one area I think you need to really dominate against LA, because then they might be able to get away with a little bit of a run game, and then protecting Stafford. And when Stafford has time, he's a veteran, and he's very accurate, still got that strong arm. He can make all the throws, and eventually Nakua and Kupp and those guys are going to get open. So I have LA winning that game, but I don't think it will be easy. In week number 5, a lot of Packers fans are upset that I've picked the Rams to win this game because the Packers have owned the Rams. But I would like to point out that Stafford has only played one of those games. They played in 2021, Stafford played. Stafford did not play last year. Stafford did not play the year before in those games. So, I don't know how much that really counts. Plus, in 2021, the Packers were a better team with a better quarterback. So, It's a lot different in my opinion. Yes, LaFleur, McVay, familiar with each other, come from the same tree, the Shanahan tree. They know each other well. I definitely think the Packers could beat the Rams. Don't get me wrong. They're probably at the same level of team. If not, the Packers might be a little bit better in my opinion based on last year's result and their trajectory this year. But LA, I mean, in LA, right? It's not in Green Bay. It's not in bad weather, cold weather, right? Like it was in 2021. I also feel like I think that the Rams can run the ball on the Packers and establish a tone and a pace of play that can allow them to play from in front, which is where they're most effective, and then they can get their play action dealing as well. I also feel like at least one of Kupp or Nakua are going to have a pretty easy matchup, as Alexander can only really cover one of them. And then on the other side, I do think the Packers will be able to move the ball without a doubt, but I just don't. I think that in the fourth quarter, I would rather trust Stafford to come through than Love. That's just my opinion. I like Love, but he hasn't proven in the fourth quarter as much as Stafford has. I just have more confidence there with the home team in that setting. So in a close game, I'm going to lean towards the Rams. Then there's a bye week and a little bit of a tricky run here with the Vikings and the Raiders, and then the Seahawks in Seattle. Miami on Monday night, the Patriots in New England. So let's go over the games that I think for sure they're going to win. So I feel pretty good about LA beating my Patriots in New England. Now, that is a little tricky just because it's in New England, and in week 11, it could be really cold. It could be really rainy. It could be windy. It could be ugly weather, which the Rams, obviously being a dome team and a West Coast team and kind of a pretty team, Hollywood team, not really used to playing in that environment, but New England really is a defense-only team. Their offense is really, really bad. And honestly, I just think McVay, Stafford, being the vets experience that they have, should be able to manage the game, run it a little bit. Just don't allow the Patriots defense to take over the game. And then on the other side, I feel like their defense should be able to take care of business. Even if it's ugly, I think the Rams should be able to manage that. The experience they have in the coaching staff compared to New England as well. Belichick's gone. And so I think LA should win that game pretty easily. It will probably be like 24-10, something like that. Pretty ugly. Then we've got the next game I think they should win, which is the Dolphins game on Monday night. That should be a fun game, but it is Monday Night Football at home, and it's the Dolphins traveling from the east to the west. And I do feel pretty good about the Rams moving the ball on the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins defense this year is definitely going to take a step back. I'm not in love with moving on from Vic Fangio. I'm intrigued to see how that works out for them. I feel like their pass rush is going to be beat up for a majority of the year. They might be coming back and be back and healthy by week 10 for sure, but might not be the same. That is Chubb and Phillips. Without Wilkins in there, I think you're going to be able to run the ball consistently on them. And I think their secondary is a tad overrated. I think you can move the ball on the Dolphins this year. Offensively is going to be the problem, where they're very talented with great receivers. But I do feel the way that the Rams play, they like to play a lot of two deep safety. They don't give up a lot of big plays. I think that's going to force Miami to run the ball and kind of be pretty like short pass centric, which is fine with Tua and Miami. But I also feel like eventually that will lead to the Rams, forcing some stops in the red zone and potentially the Rams coming through in more of a high-scoring affair. So I definitely think it could go either way here. But Monday night at home, East going West, and the Dolphins probably having the worst offensive line and the worst quarterback in this matchup, I'm going to take LA. Week number 9, I think they'll probably lose to Seattle in Seattle. Los Angeles has played the Seahawks really well under Pete Carroll, but this is no longer Pete Carroll's team. This is Mike McDonald's team. Now, I did feel like Los Angeles played the Ravens defense about as well as I saw any team play them last year, and that was a great game. But I do feel like Seattle is going to have better coach defense. I think their offense is extremely talented. And I don't necessarily feel like the Rams pass rush is going to go into Seattle and overwhelm the Seahawks offensive line, which is kind of like the one area I'm concerned about Seattle. I like Geno. He's definitely not Stafford, but I think he's definitely at least average. I like the receivers there, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and of course DK Metcalf. Noah Fant's not bad, and Kenneth Walker can run the rock. They've got talent on offense, But defense is, I think, where they're going to improve a ton. I think they've got some players in the front seven, like Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy in the first round. I think that their Draymond Jones they signed last offseason. Nwosu will be back and healthy. Their linebackers, I think, have improved. Their secondary, Witherspoon, is a stud, in my opinion. So I feel like Seattle is a pretty slept-on team overall, and I do think they should be able to take one game over LA in Seattle, where I have a lot of respect for that home field. It's difficult to win there twice. It's difficult to win there and against Seattle twice because of that home field that they have in one of those games. So after that, I think that LA is probably going to beat the Raiders and the Vikings. That being said, I could see them maybe losing to the Vikings. That's possible, just because the Vikings are very familiar with the Rams, right? Kevin O'Connell is obviously the Vikings coach, so there's going to be a lot of crossover in what they do offensively, of course, and obviously there's going to be a lot of information on their players, information on the scheme, and so forth and so on. Now, if that game was in Minnesota and it was a Thursday night, I might actually pick the Vikings, but again, it's a short week. I always lean towards the home team, especially when it's the superior team. That's almost a scheduled loss for the Vikings, but there will be that storyline of O'Connell versus McVay, teacher versus pupil, so to speak. And Brian Flores is the defensive coordinator that absolutely dismantled Sean McVay in the Super Bowl once upon a time. Now, that was a different Rams team, but I'm just putting that out there that he does kind of know how to attack a McVay offense. So I wouldn't be shocked if the Vikings pulled off a crazy upset, but I'm going to take the Rams. I do think the Rams are just better than the Raiders. They have the better quarterback, the better, more explosive offense. The Raiders might have the better defense, but overall, after the bye week, you've got to give the edge to McVay over a guy like Antonio Pierce. So I'm going to take the Rams there. So right now, the Rams are real hot at 8-3, but I think down the stretch here, they're going to start to lose some games. So I think that the Rams are going to lose to the Eagles. The Eagles, to me, are just more talented than the Rams. I think where it really will show up is the line of scrimmage. I think the Eagles' offensive line is dominant. Their defensive line is very, very good. And I think Jalen Hurts is solid. They've got great receivers. Saquon's there now. I could see Saquon having a huge game here. Eagles running the ball really, really well, controlling the pace of the game. The last time they played, I want to say it was 2 years ago, it was somewhat similar to that, where the Eagles were just more talented. They just ran the ball, they controlled the clock, and the Rams just never really could get a feel for the game. They just never had control of the game. And that's how I feel like the Eagles play at their best, and I feel like that's how they'd play the Rams. So that's why I think the Rams would lose that game. Week 13, I think this might be a surprising loss to the Saints, but we'll come back to that. I think they will lose to the Bills and Josh Allen. I think that's a tough matchup for the Rams overall, with Josh Allen just being a quarterback that you can't really game plan for. And seeing as how the Rams don't have excellent defensive personnel, it's solid, but it's not excellent. I don't see them being able to overwhelm the Bills' kind of underwhelming receiving core. I don't see them being able to shut down the running game of the Bills. And I definitely feel like Sean McDermott, at least the last time they played the Rams offense, did a pretty darn good job game planning for them in that opener in 2022. That was, a pretty shocking result in terms of the Bills just blowing away the Rams in that game. But I do feel like the Bills, there's something to that. McDermott, I think, can go toe-to-toe with McVay on that side of the ball, and I feel like Josh Allen will just take over this other side of the ball and win that game. I feel like that is a tough environment, too. You'd almost rather them play in Buffalo. I don't know why. Buffalo is really hard to play in, but in the Dome, it's even harder to me to stop Allen, just because there's no elements to really slow down his velocity, his accuracy, or to kind of make him make a mistake. So he's just such a stud. It's hard for me to imagine the Rams winning that game. Week 16, the Rams at the Jets. I am going to take the Jets here. The Jets have one of the best defenses in the NFL, if not the best defense in the NFL this year. And Rodgers is still there. Rodgers has typically beaten Stafford throughout his career. On top of that, Rodgers, I feel like this is a tough team for the Rams to beat because their defense is so good. I think their front seven is awesome. Their secondary can cover the Rams, and that's going to be a really difficult game for the Rams to win in a shootout. And on the other side, I could see the Jets, putting together enough drives on offense where they're running the ball, play action. Garrett Wilson's making plays. Mike Williams could be making plays out there if he's healthy at this point. And it's in New York, where the Rams have to travel from LA to New York. So I'm actually pretty high on the Jets this year. Some people may disagree with that, but as long as Rodgers stays healthy, I think the Jets will win this game. Now, that being said, if he's not healthy, the Rams should easily win the game because they don't really have, Tyrod Taylor. Like, they should be able to win that game. So, yeah, there's some losses adding up here. But I do feel like LA will beat Seattle at least once this year. So I will give them that game. And then it kind of comes down to the Saints and the Cardinals games, which I think are games that could go either way. So I could see the Rams beating the Saints. I could also see the Rams losing to the Saints. New Orleans is a tough place to play in the Dome. Derek Carr is a little bit of a streaky quarterback. And given that the Rams don't have like I don't think their defense is overwhelming. I think it's fairly average. Decent scheme overall, but I don't see like great talent in any area of their defense. I think they've definitely improved in their secondary, but I wouldn't say it's elite. I wouldn't say their pass rush is elite, especially post Aaron Donald. So I could see Derek Carr having a good game here with Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed moving the ball. The Rams did beat the Saints last year, but that game I believe was in LA. So I think it would be a little bit different. The Rams also would have to deal with a pretty solid defense in New Orleans. They've got good corners. They've got a solid front seven. Demario Davis is a stud. Marshawn Lattimore is a stud. So that's a tricky, tough game. So I know that's 4 losses or 5 losses in a row. So that might not happen, right? So you might have to go with the Saints or the Rams to win that game. But that's just how I have it going in my head. I could be wrong, though. You never know. And then I could see the Rams winning this game against the Cardinals, which would make them 10-7. I could also see them losing this game to the Cardinals because I think they could lose to the Cardinals once this year. The Cardinals are very explosive on offense. With Kyler Murray being healthy, I think that makes the game potential of being a shootout pretty possible. Their offensive line is really a lot better than people think. Their run game is solid, as it was last year. Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to provide a real number 1 receiver. Trey McBride is a real deal tight end. And they've got some playmakers there in Arizona. I also think their defense is schematically challenging. Not extremely talented, but schematically challenging. So I could see the Cardinals winning that game. So overall, I have them at 9-8, 10-7. Kind of similar to last year. But I do see them making the playoffs as of right now. It just is really a matter to me of like, is Stafford healthy? Is Stafford not healthy? And that's kind of the vibe I'm getting. Like, can Stafford stay upright? I am a little worried about the defense in certain matchups without Aaron Donald and Raheem Morris anymore. But I do think their offense will be pretty darn tough to stop, which will make them a very relevant team in the NFC. So that's how I see the Rams season going. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Gronk, spike the like button. We'll see you in the next video. Peace.